On the same day, Michigan was finally crowned national champion after a long time without that feat. Ohio State goes into the news cycle with a couple of major pieces of news. Lettermen Row is here to break it all down. Tim May, the 40-year vet. Andy Backstrom on the other side of that screen. It's weird because they're crisscross, but Ohio State not crisscross. They know exactly what they're doing, trying to get back on top of the mountain as Michigan is there right now after beating Washington down in Houston. Something about Houston, and I'm not going to say it. Andy Backstrom again on the other side of that screen. That's Tim May. I am just Spencer Holbrook. Let's talk about it, fellas. Over the weekend, Ohio State lands a transfer portal commitment from Seth McLaughlin. Bolsters the offensive line. Alabama's starting center the last 2 years. Can play guard or center. The Buckeyes have flexibility there. Ohio State also relieves Perry Eliano of his duties after 2 years as the Buckeyes safeties coach. That is a huge piece of news considering the way the safeties looked the last couple of years and improved, but also the way some things didn't go their way on the recruiting trail, the way things meshed with the coaching staff. And then 10 seconds after Michigan was crowned national champion, I know that this was not on accident. Ohio State lands a massive transfer portal commitment from do-it-all Ole Miss running back, two-time All-SEC running back Quinshon Judkins. And now we are full swing into the offseason. Andy, I'm going to start with you. Just thoughts on the last few days, because it's been I don't think roller coaster even describes it for Ohio State fans and for Ohio State.
Yeah, a lot of good news, a lot of bad news, including with Michigan winning national title for Ohio State fans. So it's kind of a roller coaster, if you will, especially last night, as you mentioned, just minutes after that game. Quinshon Judkins makes his announcement that he's committing to Ohio State. I guess my first initial reaction with that one, because that's the most recent, is Travion Henderson going to stay? Is he going to go? If he stays, that's probably the best 1-2 punch in college football at the running back position, at least in my opinion. If he goes, it's still a good situation for Ohio State at the running back position, because now you have arguably, a top 3, top 2 running back from the SEC leading your team in the backfield. And that's a good position to be in. And if they're both here, Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, you kind of have your depth concerns cleared up for Ohio State. Now, I don't know what that would do with Dallin Hayden. I don't know if he would stick around to be running back 3 again, especially after redshirting a season. But that's kind of my initial reaction from the running back standpoint. And then the others, I think the defensive staff change, when that came to light, that was a little bit surprising, just given that, as you mentioned, Spencer, the on-field performance from the safeties was pretty solid this year. I thought the development of Lathan Ransom the last couple of years, Sonny Styles emerging, and then even Josh Proctor, who really didn't come into full form until this year in his 6th season. I thought you could give Perry Eliano a lot of credit for that development. But again, the recruiting misses, I guess, with those top 5 stars, Caleb Downs, KJ Bolden are the 2 that come to mind the most. You'll not be able to get that talent. Could eventually put Ohio State in a bind at the safety position. So they're trying to shore that up sooner than later.
Yeah, but maybe they'll get them on the second bound. Maybe they'll get those guys on the rebound, which is what the transfer portal is all about. And number 2, keep in mind that this time a year ago, pretty much, Ryan Day, or a little bit after, Ryan Day put all of the defensive backfield under the aegis of Tim Walton, with Perry Eliano majoring in the safeties. So how much of a change that's going to be for the actual people involved, may not be as big as we think. We'll see who he ends up putting at that safety spot from a coaching standpoint, or does he go that route? That remains to be seen. There's something to be said for one guy coaching the secondary, so this one cohesive unit, but that's a lot of players. So we'll see where that goes. But the way I would sum up what's going on right now is Michigan won the national championship, obviously in fine fashion, dominating Washington. So Michigan won this one night in January, but Ohio State's pressing the gas. Ohio State's bound and determined to win the month of January. And I've been very impressed by what I've seen so far. People, obviously, all the Klimt, et cetera, about what went on in the transfer portal for Ohio State in December, when in fact, as we pointed out here, they only lost a couple of guys that really you would have been counting on going into the 2024 season. One of them being running back Chip Trainum, for sure, from a depth standpoint in that running back room. And what do? They go out and get, and you could argue, the best running back in the Southeastern Conference the last 2 years, even this year. And my only question about Quinshon is how much he's been worked or used over the last 2 seasons. Running backs only have so much tread on the tire, but if you can put him in a room where he doesn't have to be the guy every series, it could be very interesting. And then, of course, they get, in my opinion, if you watch the video of Seth McLaughlin, I always want to call him McLaughlin, the center from Alabama. By the way, there's a McFarland Boulevard in Tuscaloosa. That's why I'm getting them mixed up. But I digress. Except for a few bad snaps, and there were a few, this guy's really good, at least in my opinion. And, so I think, for example, Ohio State, Will Howard, we talked about him ad nauseum last week, and we should, because he's rocking the boat. And from a quarterback standpoint, I think they've gotten 3 guys who could be starters, in September on the offensive side of the ball. That's a pretty good day or a pretty good month in the transfer portal.
I would completely agree with that, Tim. Last year Ohio State went into the transfer portal, found some guys on the defensive side of the ball to bolster that unit, and a couple of them helped. A couple of them will help here in the future. But it did ultimately mean the Buckeyes were going to be a top 5 defense. Well, where was the deficiency this year? It wasn't with the defense. It was a top 5 defense. It was on the offensive side of the ball. You didn't like your quarterback play well enough to guarantee Kyle McCord the starter for next year. So you go out and get Will Howard because Kyle McCord leaves the program. You aren't sure about the running back depth. You go out and address that with a huge splash in the transfer portal. That's probably the biggest splash Ohio State's made in the portal as far as name recognition goes, probably since Justin Fields, if we're being honest. Like a 2-time All-SEC running back.
Yeah, and that wasn't even a portal. That was before the portal really started. Go ahead now.
Yeah. They've got some great players in the portal, but I think as far as name recognition, Quinshon Judkins might be the most sexy name they've brought in since they've even opened the transfer portal. This is a massive coup for Ohio State. And then you get a 2-year starter, a guy who's started 25 games, appeared in 38 for Alabama. You want some beef up front and on the offensive line, you're getting it, a big dose of it from the southeast. So I think Ohio State is really attacking where it needs to get better right now. Offensive line, quarterback, even running back. Trayvon Henderson hasn't played a full season in 3 years. So I'm impressed with what Ohio State's doing. I think more moves are on the way. And of course, we'll have that covered at lettermenrow.com. But those people who have been doubting Ryan Day, and I get the criticisms because, the 3 losses to Michigan, you just lost to the national champion, and then your roster kind of took a nosedive for the Cotton Bowl. He's being as aggressive as I think he can be, given the scholarship numbers, given what he's doing. In the last month, you go from sulking about the Michigan loss to now signing Jeremiah Smith, keeping Edric Houston in the fold, signing another 5-star wide receiver, Mylan Graham, Aaron Nolan, the offensive lineman that they signed, and then, oh, by the way, go into the portal and get a bunch of guys. I think this last month for Ohio State has kind of reminded folks of what this program is.
Yeah, and the guys that have decided to come back, that's like winning. Some of these battles, these transfer portal battles, are the guys that have decided so far to come back on this roster. That's huge, and we'll see in the final days how many other guys decide to come back. But that's like winning. That's like winning. It's kind of like a cross between winning a transfer portal battle and a recruiting battle to get a proven player back who can help you. Ty Hamilton, for example, that's a big deal. To stay solid in the middle of that defensive line. Tyleik Williams. Those 2 guys. Now, should they have even been pondering leaving in the first place? That's up to conjecture. But the bottom line is they're coming back and they're already proven, and they had good years this year. It all adds up, man, to a pretty stout roster for the start of spring if a couple other guys pull that same trigger.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm not sure about Ty Hamilton, but Tyleik Williams and Jack Sawyer could have easily left. They had great seasons, especially the way Jack Sawyer ended his season. But they've got 5 starter-level guys on the defense side of the ball who have already announced they're coming back. Tyleik Williams, Ty Hamilton, Jack Sawyer, Cody Simon, who announced even before the bowl game, and then Lathan Ransom, who, coming off that injury, people were unsure what would he do next, and he's coming back as well. So That's 5 already on the defensive side of the ball alone. I think we're all expecting at least a few more And, that's a really good sign. As you mentioned, Tim, that's like winning 5 stars in itself, whether it's, keeping them from the transfer portal or keeping them from the NFL draft more likely. And that's a huge win for a program nowadays. And
yeah. I saw a comment on Twitter the last couple of days where Ryan Day lost his locker room. And I'm going, what an idiot comment, maybe by an idiot. I think you can have both, right? But I mean, he lost his locker room, yet you got these guys signing up to come back. Now, there are reasons for all those, just like you said. One thing is to help yourself in the draft, whatever, but the other is unfinished business. They can be one and the same, because it's unfinished business if you're not ranked in the draft like you want to be too, But the bottom line is the idea that Ryan Day lost his locker room is a joke. These guys are showing an allegiance, which is huge. And you and I think we all agree, Spencer. Lathan Ransom was going to be an all Big Ten safety, in my opinion. Maybe y'all disagree, but that's a huge get if he comes back 100% totally healthy, for example. And I didn't mean to leave those other guys out. I was just talking about sort of like recent ones that just jumped out of my mind. Obviously, Jack Sawyer coming back is huge. We'll see if JT Tuimoloau, what happens with him.
Yeah, if you want to see those Buckeyes next year on the field when they all return, and the new Buckeyes on August 31st, 234 short days from now, use the promo code Buckeyes for $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app. That is right. Use the promo code Buckeyes for $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app. They do this thing where they match prices, even help you with prices, because if you find a ticket on the Game Time app, you buy it. You find a ticket in the same section at a competing ticketing website, and then you go back to Game Time and say, hey, look what I found. They'll refund you 110% the difference of that ticket price. That's right. The terms do apply, as we always like to say here, but use the promo code Buckeyes, get $20 off your first purchase in the Game Time app today. I think the returns are huge. But this is something that's been building for a while, really since the Michigan game, talking about guys potentially returning way before the Cotton Bowl. A lot of guys played in the Cotton Bowl. I'm not discounting those at all, but, I think these transfer portal additions that the Buckeyes have seen, especially Seth McLaughlin, even more than Quinshon Judkins, because Judkins is a great player, but you needed offensive line help, Andy. I think this really does start to solidify this offense for next year and shows you that the deficiencies Ohio State has, they know that they had to address this offseason. And I think it shows the urgency that they're acting with when it comes to the 2024 calendar year.
Yeah, not only the urgency from Ryan Day, but also the urgency from Justin Fry, probably at the offensive line standpoint. I mean, this is a make or break year for him as well, entering his third year with the program. And I think for him, it's got to be, if we have the talent here, okay. If we don't, let's go get more. And I think even at this point, even with, the addition that they've made, I still feel like they could make more on the offensive line. I still think they could pull in more new faces to at least add to the competition. We saw them add 2 offensive linemen last year, Victor Cutler Jr., who ended up being a backup at the center position. And then, of course, with Josh Simmons, who's ended up starting at left tackle from San Diego State. I think they could still add at least one more offensive lineman in the transfer portal. I think they need to add at least one more offensive lineman in the transfer portal. I still think when people are posting like projections of what the Ohio State offensive line and the Ohio State offensive lineup in general could look like, the offensive line is still the weak point in my eyes. And I know that's just because we saw the Cotton Bowl and everything go poorly in that. But, I still think that's the weakest part of this offense. And I think there needs to be done a little bit more to revamp that, because it doesn't matter what running back you add. It doesn't matter what quarterback you add. If your offensive line can't block effectively, you're not going to be able to win in the college football playoff.
Wait a minute. Did I just wander into a football 101 class? I think I did. Right? I'm sitting in the back, though. Yeah, you're exactly right. And what bothered you it wasn't just, in my opinion, it wasn't just how the starters played really well against average teams, not so well against, like teams, in my opinion. But then there was no depth, that we saw where you go, okay, let's shoot this guy in there. Maybe he'll do a better job, but there was no confidence in the depth, even in that Cotton Bowl, I'm going to be totally honest with you. I have no idea what happened with Carson Hinsman from the standpoint of, I asked a straightforward question after the game where there was a disciplinary action or not. And Ryan Day talked all the way around that and didn't answer the question. Clearly there was something there other than he was beaten out, and we're just going to go with Enoch Vamahi at right guard and Matt Jones at center, because that didn't work, and unless you were putting in a door, and then it worked. It worked very good. Yeah, the depth there, and you got. I've always believed with an offensive line coach, you got to give him time not only to get rolling, but 3 years. You got to give them 3 years to get their guys in there too. Because it is an assembly line when it comes to offensive linemen. Still, they're, like I always say, there's not very many Orlando Paces that have ever walked in the front door. And so we'll see where that goes. But another place where I think they could use a body, and I know y'all are going to laugh at me, but I think they could use a proven style player at wide receiver, out of the portal. I truly believe that. And just from the standpoint of maybe adding some depth or whatever else you want to call it, leadership to that wide receiver room of an older guy going into this year. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't think that it would be the worst idea, but I ultimately don't think it's going to happen. Yeah. There's scholarship crunch, to be honest. The Buckeyes still have positions they need to fill. A new safeties coach is probably going to want to bring at least one new body in, if we're being honest, just to help bolster what he thinks needs to happen in that room. You look at defensive end, I think they still could stand to add a defensive end more than they need to add a wide receiver. You kind of count on the young wave to be the young wave, but also be the next wave. I don't think that a receiver would happen, but I see where you're coming from. I understand why you would think that, and I don't think that you're wrong, Tim, by any stretch. But the additions that they're making and that they have made have shown that they trust the wide receivers. They didn't blame the wide receivers. There are some out there who have been critical of Brian Hartline and the wide receivers this year, and I think there two things can be true. They took a little bit of a step back. We'll talk about that all offseason, but also they trust the wide receivers to get open when it comes to having Will Howard as their quarterback, because they brought in Will Howard. They trust the wide receivers to do a good job of blocking downfield when it comes to Travion Henderson potentially and Quinshon Judkins for sure now. So the moves that they're making show you where they think they're okay. And I think they know that they're okay at left tackle, whether people like it or not, because the narrative was set in August rather than in November. Josh Simmons was really good at the end of the year. He really was. He was good.
What sticks in my head is that one play, though, man. You can't blame a guy for one play, right? But when he let that guy go and just flattened Devin Brown after Devin Brown went back in the Cotton Bowl game, that's just, wow. He never had a shot at that guy. Speed rusher. It was crazy. Go ahead.
I'm not dismissing the Cotton Bowl, but I've got thoughts on the Cotton Bowl. We could get into it another time. I think Josh Simmons.
Why not get into it now?
Because I'm trying to keep this video on the rails, Tim.
I got you.
So I can make a title for it and make it all look good.
Yeah, I know. I know, and I'm the opposite of keeping something on the rails. I understand that. Go ahead.
That's why we keep you around, Tim. I think they know that they're set at left tackle with Josh Simmons. They have that anchor that they can build off of. He was really good in November.
I agree.
Even against Michigan, I thought he was really good. They think that they probably need help on the interior now that Matt Jones is gone, because there's no longer the flexibility again in the Michigan State week to say, hey, maybe Matt Jones can play center for us. Let's try it out, and then not do it until the Cotton Bowl. So they address the interior of the offensive line. They think that they've got something good at left tackle. They needed a running back. They needed a quarterback. They look like they don't need a wide receiver. They're not hosting a lot on the defensive line like we thought maybe they would. So follow the tea leaves, follow the action. The action is going to tell you everything you need to know. And Ryan Day said after the Cotton Bowl, Tim, I got to go to Andy. He hasn't talked to him forever.
He doesn't feel that good. Go ahead.
The action says that they know where they need to get better, Andy. And I think that you're seeing that with their transfer portal additions right now with Seth McLaughlin, with the quarterback Will Howard, with Quinshon Judkins.
Yeah, I think, we talked about earlier in the video, there was a lot of this. maybe impatience among Ohio State fans, just being like, are they going to act in the transfer portal? What's going on here? I think people need to remember too, sometimes the best players are still playing in the college football
Yeah.
playoff. They're not going to be leaving their team until the college football playoff's over. So look at these pickups. I mean, I get that only one of the three was playing in the CFP, but the other two are championship caliber players, I believe. Ole Miss was a top 10, top 15 team a lot of this year. And you look at Kansas State, and I know that they weren't as good this year, but last year they were, of course, playing on championship weekend in the conference championship realm. So there's a lot to be said about the kind of players that Ohio State is pulling in, maybe at the right time. I think there's maybe a little bit of an instinct to pull in players as soon as they enter the transfer portal because you want to get them before they're scooped up. But I think there's also something to be said about getting the guys that maybe waited a little bit, or, for Seth McLaughlin, like he's still starting for an Alabama team that was contending for a national championship, and by the way, he didn't play well against Michigan. So now he has an added incentive to win that game too. He's kind of blending in well with all the other Ohio State guys that want to beat Michigan after everything that's happened in the last couple of years, and especially this year. Yeah. And so, I think they talk about the culture fit, and that's the one right there that fits him with the culture, right? It has a edge and a chip on his shoulder, and then also fits in the positional need. Will Howard's already talked about how this was the perfect fit for him in terms of wanting to up his NFL draft stock, wanting to win a national championship, and of course, beat, as he already said, that team up north. So there's all this to be said about, when you're getting, I think for Ohio State, this has been the right time to do it. And I think it's all about patience in a sport that's become very impatient.
Yeah. Seth McLaughlin was a starting center at Alabama, not Alabama A&M, or Auburn. I mean, Alabama. So I'm interested to maybe hear even more in depth from him about what's going on with his move. Clearly, if you go back and watch the last play against Michigan, with the way he, it was a little bit, it wasn't a bad snap. It was an off-center snap. That's kind of like redundant. But the way he kind of like walked away in disgust from that play was interesting, but so we'll see where that goes. There could still be some competition there. Carson Hinsman, I don't think has evaporated. He's somewhere, we'll see how that goes. The only interesting thing about all this, guys, is and we'll get into this in another one of these videos, I'm sure, is what is the plan for Dallin Hayden? I mean, why redshirt a guy? I don't understand the redshirt aspect of it. And now I understand improving yourself when you can in a room when you need to get an immediate impact guy. You got two guys coming in who are freshmen into the running back room who are really highly touted. One, they're different guys without a doubt. They're different kinds of running backs. But I'm just wondering what Dallin Hayden, is really thinking here, because obviously we don't get to talk to these guys every day. Dallin Hayden, when he's been called on, has delivered. It's not like he says some guy's gone in there and taken up space. In some ways, he's delivered as well as as Mayan Williams did, or Chip Trayanum in terms of being effective the last couple of years. And yet, I don't understand what's going on in that room, I guess, is my point. So we'll see where it goes. I think we all, like, and Andy touched on it a minute ago, sometimes the guys you want are still playing in the transfer portal and in the coaching ranks, right? And so it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the next couple of weeks. I'm as curious as anybody to see what happens with the offensive staff down the line here.
Yeah, we'll get into the Dallin Hayden piece of that next week after all NFL drafts decisions are done. Maybe give a little sneak peek into the coverage. After all NFL draft decisions are done, I will go position by position and do a roster reset for every position on the field, even special teams, as we talk about that. Maybe we'll even do a coaching staff reset as well, because more changes are expected to be on the way for Ohio State. We will have them covered at lettermenrow.com, where we have everything covered. So the Seth McLaughlin transfer, the Letterman Lounge message board told you that was in the works. Quinshon Judkins, the Letterman Lounge message board had you covered there, and we have been talking about that for a few days now. Possible staff changes. We're still talking about that at the Lettermen Lounge message board. All that to say is go to the Lettermen Lounge message board and you will be informed on Ohio State football. Make sure you keep watching the Lettermen Row YouTube channel and you will be just as informed on Ohio State football. But you can go to lettermenrow.com right now, get all the coverage that you want for $1 for your first month. That's right, $1 for your first month. Kick 2024 off in style with $1 for your first month at lettermenrow.com, where Andy Backstrom's coverage resides. I got it right that time. Where Tim May's coverage resides. I got it right a second time. And I'm just Spencer Holbrook, but I'm there every day. We cover the Buckeyes 365 days a year, and we do it today. We'll do it tomorrow. We do it the day Michigan wins the national championship. I know you don't want to hear that, but that's what we do.
By the way, that's cheaper than Peacock, and I'll just leave it at that because people are going to need Peacock this weekend.
Yeah, as the NFL playoffs kick off, CJ Stroud going to finally get it, a chance to prove himself in the NFL playoffs during his brilliant rookie year. A lot to talk about with Ohio State. All that's to say, go to lettermenrow.com. You'll see it all. For Tim May, the 40-year vet, for Andy Backstrom, I'm Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We'll see you guys back here tomorrow for another one of these videos.